Hello, everyone. Welcome to IFA's Open House. As some of you know, India Foundation for the Arts is a nationwide, independent body that looks at supporting and implementing arts projects, cultural projects across the country. We've been around since 1995-96, supporting the arts in very different ways through our grant programs, projects, and the different ways in which we have made possible projects that look at diverse cultural practices in different languages, in different states of the country. The outcomes of these projects are there as books, films, productions, concerts, archival material, websites. We've also worked with museums and archives with their collections. These are out there in the public domain. And as some of you know, we come back to share that with you through our project showcases. Before the pandemic, we used to do that in site, that is, partner with specific organizations, go to different cities, and actually meet you face to face to discuss these projects and enable our grantees, scholars, and artists to share their work with you. That we continue to do now as project showcases online. But today's event is a little different from that. The open house is an engagement, is a platform where I think hopes to explain our programs a little better, make them slightly more accessible to you, answer your questions. But we do that through conversations with our grantees, our project coordinators, artists and scholars who've gone through the process of applying to this program and then making their projects see the light of day. We also have our program officers in these IFA open houses to respond to any question that you might have about applications. So you might say this is our invitation to you to apply to very specific programs. So today we are here with a program that is special to us because it is a program that relates to Bangalore, our city, the city that has nourished and nurtured IFA over the past 26 years. Before I request my colleague John to tell you a little more about the program, the particular category we'll be talking today about, and our invited speakers, our grantees and project coordinators, a few house rules. So as you know, the comment section of this Zoom conversation is where you can put your comments, suggestions, recommendations that you may have while you're listening to this conversation. There is a Q&A box where you can put in your questions, and you will know that at the end of this discussion, there will be some question time where our speakers will take these questions and respond to you. But what we're also trying to do today is enable audio voices of people who may raise their hands, and we'll allow you into the webinar to ask your question in person. But your video will be off. You'll be able to ask that through your audio mechanism. But please remember that we will not be able to do this during the presentations. It will happen at the end. So as the presentations come to an end and we announce the questioner, that's when you're supposed to raise your hand. So when you do, we will enable you to come in and ask the questions. We are also live on the IFA Facebook page, and you can ask your questions there as well. And somebody from there is going to feed the questions back to our speakers here. Today's conversation will be in Kannada and English. We will combine the two languages. And there's also going to be translations that you will see in the comments box, as well as on our Facebook page. So with that, John, I'll hand it over to you to tell us a little bit about the program and the category.
Thank you, Arundhati. So I welcome all of you to this IFA Open House today. As Arundhati mentioned, we are going to discuss about curated artistic engagements, which is a category under Project 560 program at IFA. As you know, Project 560 is dedicated to the city of Bangalore, that is the host city of IFA. And the name of Project 560 program is taken from the first 3 digits of Bangalore's PIN code, 560. Curated artistic engagement is about activating the city through year-long art events in various parts of the city. It is about making public interventions in the city, where the citizens of Bangalore can experience art directly. So in that sense, it's about integrating art with the everyday lives of the people in the city. So today we are going to hear from two project coordinators who recently made such year-long curatorial interventions in the city of Bangalore. They will also share the insights about the application process and the experience of how a basic idea got transformed into a curatorial vision as a series of events with suggestions from IFA staff, and how they dealt with the challenges of holding the curatorial process together through various stages of their projects. So today's, as Arundhati mentions, today's conversation will be both in Kannada and English. And MD Pallavi will be joining us soon. And Pallavi has helped us, IFA, as an expert evaluator to review proposals we received under Project 560 last year. And she'll also share her experience of curating music and performing arts in the city of Bangalore. And as panelists, we have Suresh Jayaram and Chanakya Vyas with us today. Both of them were project coordinators of curated artistic engagements very recently during very challenging COVID years. So they will share how their projects took shape from initial ideas towards project completion. Suresh Jayaram is an artist, curator, and co-founder of One Shanti Road Studio Gallery. Chanakya Vyas is a theatre maker and educator who also leads Indian Ensemble, which is a theatre group in Bangalore. So I welcome Suresh Jayaram to start making the presentation, please.
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ನೀವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ. ಇದು IFA ಇಂಡಿಯಾ ಫೌಂಡೇಶನ್ ಫಾರ್ ದಿ ಆರ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಅವರು ನಡೆಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತಾ ಅಂತ ಅವರ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಕ್ಯೂರೇಟೆಡ್ ಎಂಗೇಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿದೆ. ಅದು ಹೇಗೆ ನಾವು ಈ ಐಡಿಯಾ ತಗೊಂಡು ಮುಂದೆ ಬಂದ್ವಿ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ವಿವರವಾಗಿ ಹೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ಮೊದಲಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ಮ್ಯಾಪಿಂಗ್ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಆರ್ಕೈವಲ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ವಿ. ಈ ಆರ್ಕೈವಲ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಇತಿಹಾಸದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಜನಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಸ್ಥಳಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ರಿಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ. ಈ ಕುತೂಹಲದಿಂದ ನಾವು IFA ಅವರಿಗೆ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಅಪ್ಲಿಕೇಶನ್ ಕಳಿಸಿದ್ವಿ. ಇದರಿಂದ ಏನಾಯಿತು ಅಂದರೆ ಅವರು ನಮ್ಮನ್ನ ಕರೆದು ನೀವು ಈ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ನ ನೀವು ಮುಂದುವರಿಸ್ಬೋದು, ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾದರೂ ಒಂದು ನಿಮ್ಮ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಕ್ಯೂರೇಟೆಡ್ ಎಂಗೇಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಜನಗಳ ಜೊತೆ ನಾವು ಸೇರಿ ಒಂದು ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ಕ್ಯೂರೇಷನ್ ಅನ್ಬೋದು. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನನ್ನ ಕೊಲೀಗ್ಸ್ ಆದ ಅರ್ಚನಾ ಹಂಡೆ ಮತ್ತು ಭರತೇಶ್ ಸೇರಿಕೊಂಡು ಅವರಿಬ್ರು ಕಲಾವಿದರು ನಾವು ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗೆ ಈ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ನ ಹೇಗೆ ಎಂಗೇಜ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿರುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ಮೆಟೀರಿಯಲ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡು ನಾವು 3-4 ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಏನಂದರೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಇತಿಹಾಸದಲ್ಲಿ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ನೇಯುವುದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಗೆ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ವಿಸ್ತಾರವಾದ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಅದರ ಹೆಸರು ನಾವು ಅರ್ಬನ್ ಫ್ಯಾಬ್ರಿಕ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ವಿ. ಈ ಅರ್ಬನ್ ಫ್ಯಾಬ್ರಿಕ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಈ ಕೌದಿ ಹೊಲಿಯೋದ್ರಿಂದ ಹಿಡಿದು ಈ ರೇಷ್ಮೆ ಬೆಳವಣಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ರೇಷ್ಮೆಯನ್ನು ನೇಯುವುದ ಒಂದು ಹೇಗೆ ನಾವು ಈ ದೇವಾಂಗ ಸಂಘದವರು ರೇಷ್ಮೆ ನೇಯ್ತಿದ್ರು, ಮತ್ತು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಹೇಗೆ ನಾವು ತಿಳಿದಾಗೆ ಬಿನ್ನಿ ಮಿಲ್ ಆಗಲಿ ಬೇರೆ ಮಿಲ್ಸ್ ಆಗಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಹೀಗೆಲ್ಲ ಮುಚ್ಕೊಂಡ್ಬರ್ತಿದೆ, ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಹೇಗೆ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಮಾಡ್ಕೋಬೋದು ಆ ಇಮೇಜಸ್ ತಗೊಂಡು ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಹಿಸ್ಟಾರಿಕಲ್ ಆಗಿ ನಾವು ಏನೇನು ನಮ್ಗೆ ಗೊತ್ತಿದೆಯೋ ಅದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ತಗೊಂಡು ಆರ್ಟಿಸ್ಟ್ಗಳ ಜೊತೆ ನಾವು ಈ ಕ್ಯೂರೇಟೆಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಇದಲ್ದಿರೆ ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ಮ್ಯಾಪಿಂಗ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ಲಾಲ್ಬಾಗ್ ಮತ್ತು ಕಬ್ಬನ್ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ ಅಂತ ಉದ್ಯಾನವನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಮ್ಯಾಪ್ಸನ್ನು ತಯಾರು ಮಾಡಿ ಆರ್ಟಿಸ್ಟ್ಗಳ ಜೊತೆ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ಕನ್ನು ಕರೆದು ನಾವು ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಮಾತಾಡಿ ಈ ಲಾಲ್ಬಾಗ್ ಮತ್ತು ಕಬ್ಬನ್ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ ಮಹತ್ವ ಏನು, ಇದರ ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಏನು, ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ಮರಗಳು ಬೆಳೆದಿದ್ರು, ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಈ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ ಈ ಜಾಗಗಳನ್ನು ಹೇಗೆ ಉಪಯೋಗಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಇದು ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಇತ್ತು, ಅದು ಸಂದೀಪ್ ಮತ್ತು ಅಶೋಕ್ ಅಂತ ನನ್ನ ಜೊತೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಇಬ್ಬರು ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ಸ್. ಅವರು ಇನ್ಸೈಡ್ ಔಟ್ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು 10 ಜನ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ಸು ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಯಾರ್ಯಾರು ಚಿತ್ರ ತೆಗೆದಿದ್ದಾರೋ ಅದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ತಗೊಂಡು ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫರ್ಸ್ನ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಸೇರಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಈ ಫೋಟೋಗಳನ್ನ ರೋಡಲ್ಲಿ ಪ್ರೊಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದರು. ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾನು ನಿಮಗೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ಶೋ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇನೆ, ಅದನ್ನು ನಿಮಗೆ ತೋರಿಸ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ನಿಮಗೆ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ? ಓಕೆ. ಇದೊಂದು ಅಣ್ಣಮ್ಮ ದೇವಿ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ನಿಮ್ಗೆಲ್ಲ ಗೊತ್ತು, ಅಣ್ಣಮ್ಮ ದೇವಿ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥ ದೇವಸ್ಥಾನ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಮೆಜೆಸ್ಟಿಕ್ ಏರಿಯಾದಲ್ಲಿದೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ನಗರ ದೇವತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಈ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಅಣ್ಣಮ್ಮ ದೇವತೆಯನ್ನ ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ಅಣ್ಣಮ್ಮ ದೇವತೆ ಹೇಗೆ ಪ್ಲೇಗ್ ಕಾಲದಿಂದ ನಮಗೆ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು, ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಅಣ್ಣಮ್ಮ ದೇವತೆಯ ಮೆರವಣಿಗೆ ಹೆಂಗಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಯಾರ್ಯಾರಿದ್ರು ಇದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ಸೇರ್ಕೊಳ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಹೀಗೆ ನಾವು ಬೇರೆ ಒಂದು ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಈ ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಜವರಾಯ ಅನ್ನೋರು ನಮ್ಮ ಸ್ನೇಹಿತರಾದ ಹರೀಶ್ ಪದ್ಮನಾಭ್ ಅವರ ತಾತ ಇವರು ಹಾರ್ಟಿಕಲ್ಚರ್ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟರ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರು. ಆ ಸಮಯದಲ್ಲಿ ಇವರು ಆಪಲ್ ಗಿಡಗಳನ್ನ ತಂದು ನೆಟ್ಟಿರೋದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಮಗೆ ತಿಳುವಳಿಕೆ ಬಂತು. ಅದನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಸೊ ಅದನ್ನ ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು ಈ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಹೀಗೆ ನೋಡಕ್ ಹೋದ್ರೆ ಈ ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿಂದ ಹೋದ ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಮಾಹಿತಿಗಳನ್ನು ತಗೊಂಡು ಅದನ್ನು ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಒಂದು ಎಕ್ಸಿಬಿಷನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ. ಇದು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು ಸೆಂಟ್ ಮೇರೀಸ್ ಫೆಸ್ಟಿವಲ್. ಸೆಂಟ್ ಮೇರೀಸ್ ಫೆಸ್ಟಿವಲ್ ಆಗೋದು ಶಿವಾಜಿನಗರಲ್ಲಿ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಮಸೀದಿಗಳು ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಚರ್ಚ್ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಈ ದೇವಸ್ಥಾನನೂ ಇದೆ. ಈ ಸಂದರ್ಭವನ್ನು ನಾವು ಈ ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಈ ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಕಾರ್ಡ್ಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವೇ ಮಾಡಿ ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಅದನ್ನ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಎಕ್ಸಿಬಿಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ನಾನು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಲಾಲ್ಬಾಗ್ ಕಬ್ಬನ್ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ ಬ್ಯಾಂಗ್ಳೂರ್ ಮ್ಯಾಪಿಂಗ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಿದ್ವಿ. ಒಂದು ದಿನ ಈ ಆರ್ಟಿಸ್ಟ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಕರೆಸಿ, ಜನಗಳನ್ನ ಕರೆಸಿ ನಾವು ಈ ಮ್ಯಾಪ್ ಅನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿ, ಕಬ್ಬನ್ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ನ ಮ್ಯಾಪ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಅವ್ರನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಒಂದು ಲಾಲ್ಬಾಗಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಕಬ್ಬನ್ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ವಾಕ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಈ ವಾಕ್ ಇಂದ ಜನಗಳಿಗೆ ಇನ್ನ ಕುತೂಹಲ ಹೆಚ್ಚುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಏನಾದ್ರೂ ಒಂದು ಐಡಿಯಾ ಇದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಬರೀ ಕುತೂಹಲ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಅದನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಹೇಗ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಅದ್ರ ಮೆಥಡಾಲಜಿ ಏನು ಅನ್ನೋದೇ ಒಂದು ಕ್ಯೂರೇಟೆಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ನ ಒಂದು ವಿಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. ಹಾಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡಿ, ಇದು ಕಬ್ಬನ್ ಪಾರ್ಕ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಯುವಂತ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟು. ಹೀಗೆ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ರೆ ನಮಗೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಸುತ್ತಮುತ್ತ ನಾವೇನಿದೆ ಅದು ಹೆರಿಟೇಜ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ನಗರದ ಮುಖ್ಯವಾದ ಉದ್ಯಾನವನಗಳಾಗಿರ್ಬೋದು, ಇಲ್ಲಿದ್ರೆ ಚಾಣಕ್ಯ ಅನ್ನೋರು ಲೇಕ್ಸ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಏನೋ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಈ ತರ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ವಿಷಯಗಳು ತಗೊಂಡು ನಾವು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಆ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ನ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಅಂಶವಾಗಿ ಏನಂದ್ರೆ ಅದು ಹಿಸ್ಟಾರಿಕಲ್ ಕಾಂಟೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಹಿಸ್ಟಾರಿಕಲ್ ಕಾಂಟೆಕ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಸೇರಿರ್ಬೇಕು. ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾವು ಹೇಗೆ ಬೇರೆ ಜನಗಳನ್ನ ಕರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಈ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇದನ್ನ ಹೇಗೆ ಪ್ರೊಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಈಗ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ವಿ ಇನ್ಸೈಡ್ ಔಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಆ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಬಿಲ್ ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ತಗೊಂಡು ರೋಡಲ್ಲೇ ಕೆಲವು ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಾಫ್ಸ್ನ ನಾವು ಪ್ರೊಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಈ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ತುಂಬಾ ಪಾಪ್ಯುಲರ್ ಆಗಿತ್ತು, ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ನೋಡಿ ತುಂಬಾ ಜನ ರೋಡಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಂತ್ಕೊಂಡು ಈ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸೂಕ್ಷ್ಮವಾಗಿ ನೋಡಿದ್ರೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಯಾಂಡಲ್ವುಡ್ ಹಿಸ್ಟೀರಿಯಾ ಅಂತ ಬರ್ತಿದೆ ಆ ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ. ಅದೇನಂದ್ರೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಡೇ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಶೋ ರಾಜ್ಕುಮಾರ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಲಿ, ವಿಷ್ಣುವರ್ಧನ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಲಿ, ಅಂಬರೀಷ್ ಆಗಿರ್ಲಿ, ಅವರು ಸಿನಿಮಾ ರಿಲೀಸ್ ಆದಾಗ ಯಾವ ತರ ಜನ ಬಿಹೇವ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಬ್ಬ ಆರ್ಟಿಸ್ಟ್ ಸಮೀರ್ ರಾಯಚೂರ್ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಅವ್ರು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದ ಕೆಲವು ಇಮೇಜಸ್ ಇದು. ಸೊ ಹಾಗೆ ನಾನು ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೆ ಬಿನ್ನಿ ಮಿಲ್ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಒಂದು, ಮತ್ತೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ವೀವಿಂಗ್ ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಈ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ, ಅರ್ಬನ್ ಫ್ಯಾಬ್ರಿಕ್ ಅಂತ. ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಜೀವನ್ ಝೇವಿಯರ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಆರ್ಟಿಸ್ಟ್ ಈ ತರ ಮೆಟೀರಿಯಲ್ ಕಲೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಅವರು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ನೇಯುವಂತ ಸ್ಥಳಗಳಿಗೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಹೀಗೆ ಎಕ್ಸಿಬಿಷನ್ ನ ಕ್ಯೂರೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು. ಸೊ ಈ ಕೆಲವು ಇಮೇಜಸ್ ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಬಟ್ಟೆ ಆಗ್ಲಿ, ನೇಯೋದಾಗ್ಲಿ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಕೌದಿ ಹೊಲಿಯೋದಾಗ್ಲಿ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ಹಾಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಜನಗಳನ್ನ ಹೇಗೆ ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮಕ್ಕೆ ನಾವು ಅಳವಡಿಸ್ಕೋಬಹುದು, ಮತ್ತೆ ಬೇರೆ ಆರ್ಟಿಸ್ಟ್ ಯಾರ್ಯಾರಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಈ ತರ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಹೇಗೆ ಇನ್ವೈಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಯಾವ ತರ ವರ್ಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಒಂದು ಕೊಲಾಬ್ರೇಟಿವ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಅಂತ ನಾವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಆರ್ಟಿಸ್ಟ್, ಅವಳು ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ ಚಿತ್ರಕಲಾ ಪರಿಷತ್ತಲ್ಲಿ, ಅವಳು ವರ್ಕು ಎಕ್ಸಿಬಿಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದೀವಿ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಸ್ಲೈಡ್ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ತೋರಿಸ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಇದು ಅನಿತಾ ರೆಡ್ಡಿ ಅಂತ ನಮ್ಮ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರು. ಅವರು ಕೌದಿಗಳ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ತುಂಬ ರಿಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಸಿದ್ದಿ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಅವರಿರೋರನ್ನ ಕರೆಸಿ ಅವರು ಒಂದು ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್ ಮಾಡಿಸಿದ್ರು. ಈ ಚಿತ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು, ಆ ಸಿದ್ದಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಹುಸೇನ್ ಬಿ ಅಂತ ಅವ್ರ ಹೆಸರು, ಅವರು ಕೌದಿ ಹೆಂಗ್ ಹೊಲಿಯೋದು ಅಂತ ಒಂದು ಚಿಕ್ಕ ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಈ ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಟೂಡೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಆಗಲಿ, ಆಚೆಯಿಂದ ಬಂದಿರೋ ಈ ಮಹಿಳೆ ಒಬ್ಳು ಎನ್ ಜಿ ಒ ಇಂದ ಬಂದು ನಮಗೆ ಈ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸೇರ್ಕೊಂಡು, ಈ ತರ ನಾವು ಕ್ಯೂರೇಟೆಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಾಗ ಅದು ಔಟ್ರೀಚ್ ಅಂತೀವಿ. ಆ ತರ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ಸ್ ನಾವು ಬೇರೆಯೊಬ್ಬರನ್ನ ಕರೆಸಿ ಅವ್ರನ್ನು ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ ಮಾಡಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಸಿಟಿ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಪ್ಲಸ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಏನು ಐಡಿಯಾ ಇದೆ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಹೆಚ್ಚಾಗಿ ವಿವರಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ಬೋದು. ಇದು ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದಾಗೆ ಅನಿತಾ ರೆಡ್ಡಿ ಮತ್ತೆ ಹುಸೇನ್ ಬಿ ಅಂತ ಅವರು, ಇದು ಚಿತ್ರಕಲಾ ಪರಿಷತ್ತಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೀತು. ಇದನ್ನ ಹೇಳಿ ನಾನು ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ, ನಿಮಗೆ ಒಂದು ಐಡಿಯಾ ಇದ್ರೆ ನೀವು ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು ಬಂದು IFA ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಮೀಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಅವರಿಗೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಹೇಳಿ ಅದನ್ನ ವಿಸ್ತಾರವಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಒಂದು ಕ್ಯೂರೇಟೆಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ತರ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ರಿಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಹಾಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಒಂದು ಈ ಐಡಿಯಾಗಳನ್ನ ಬರೀ ಐಡಿಯಾ ತರ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ತರ ಮಾಡಿ ಒಂದು ಕ್ಯೂರೇಟೆಡ್ ಎಂಗೇಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಂತ ಏನು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ಅದನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಅವ್ರು ಫಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ ನಿಮಗೆ, ಪ್ಲಸ್ ನಿಮಗೆ ಡೌಟ್ಸ್ ಏನಾದರೂ ಇದ್ರೆ ಅದನ್ನು ಸಾರ್ಟ್ ಔಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿ ನಾನು ನನ್ನ ಭಾಷಣ ಮುಗಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ನಿಮಗೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಕುತೂಹಲ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಐಡಿಯಾಗಳಿದ್ರೂ ಕೂಡ ನೀವು ಬಂದು IFA ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಕಾಣಿ ಅವರು ನೀವು ಈ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ ಆಗ್ಬೋದು. ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.
Chanakya, would you like to come in now? We are having some issue with Pallavi's connection to Zoom. There's some technical problem at her side. So basically, I'll just say that we'll wait, we'll hope for the best and hope that she's able to come and join us. But in her absence, let us just continue. And maybe Chanakya, once you're through, we'll see by then if we can enable Pallavi to get back in with us. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Arundhati. Thanks, Suresh, for the introduction. I'm going to be largely speaking in English, and I'm also going to be making an attempt to use a little bit of Kannada in between. So pardon me if I end up getting some pronunciations or words wrong. What I'll do is I'll of course share some images at the end of my presentation. But very quickly, I just thought what I will do is I'll share largely about what was the idea, what led to the idea, what was the starting point, and how that idea kind of was later on developed into, I would say, firstly giving it a form, and then giving it a kind of a very clear articulation in terms of a proposal. So idea actually started for my project once there was a lake. That's the name of the project. Idea actually started from my neighborhood. I used to live in Bellandur about 3 years ago, and it started with the lake in my neighborhood. It was the Kaikondrali Lake. I know Bellandur is very well known, famous for its the foam on the lake, and it's of course a lot has been written about it. Still the Bellandur Lake is not really in a great shape. However, I think what I found by going to this lake, Kaikondrali Lake, which is I think hardly 2 kilometers from Bellandur Lake, what I found in this lake was that there was a story behind it, and that story was documented into a short documentary film by a couple of very active citizens and residents of the neighborhood. One of them being Harini Nagendra, who's also done, and she and her team at Azim Premji University have also done a lot of research on the lakes, the history of lakes, also the communities who lived around what was not lakes then but water tanks. So for me, it kind of started with this neighborhood lake, and by looking at how the citizens came together and what the lake wasn't really in that shape. It was really in a bad shape. There wasn't really any water, there wasn't really a lake there. but it kind of transformed into a lake by a lot of participation, by a lot of pressure actually by the citizen groups, and them coming together, which I found was a very interesting story. One neighborhood ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋದು ಜನ, how do they feel a sense of belonging? Because actually, if you know of Bellandur in Bangalore, it's largely a very IT, largely the people who live there are largely working in the IT sector. So a lot of them are essentially coming into the city. Some of them have been in the city for very long. But after you come into the city, how do you make the city your own? How do you find a sense of belonging? And I think a space like a lake, or it could be a park also, sometimes gives you that sense. And of course, I'm speaking from a very, very specific small example here. But other than that, I found an idea, which is this, that ಈ ಒಂದು ಕೆರೆಗೆ ಒಂದು ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಇದೆ. ಈ ಥರ ಸುಮಾರು ಕೆರೆ ಇದೆ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಲ್ಲಿ. ಸೊ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕೆರೆದು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸ್ಟೋರಿ ಇರ್ಬೋದು ಅಲ್ವಾ. ಸೊ ವಿತ್ ಈಚ್ ಲೇಕ್, what could be the different stories, who are the people who are involved in it? And that was not an easy task, because we were not really looking at documentation of each lake. That was not the point. We eventually had to create something which would in that sense have a creative expression to the whole idea. So ಅದರಿಂದ ನಾವು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಟ್ಟು one of the things that came across was that we did not want, though I come from a practice of theatre, I've been trained in theatre, but somehow I was very clear that I did not want to make a play. ಒಂದು ನಾಟಕ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಟ್ಟು ಒಂದು ಸ್ಕ್ರಿಪ್ಟ್ ಬರೀದು ಆ್ಯಕ್ಟರ್ಸ್ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ರಿಹರ್ಸಲ್ ಮಾಡಿಬಿಟ್ಟು ಒಂದು ನಾಟಕ ರೆಡಿ ಮಾಡೋದು, ಅದು ನನ್ನ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ. ಅದು ಆ್ಯಕ್ಚುಲಿ ಐ ವಾಸ್ ಲೈಕ್, ಆ ಥರ ನನಗೆ ಬೇಡ. ಸೊ ಬೇರೆ ಯಾವ ಥರ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ನನ್ನ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸಿಂದ ಆಚೆ ಯಾವ ಥರ ನಾನು ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. So that is one interesting thing I feel for anybody who's keen to apply, is that of course you are rooted in your practice, you are in that sense practitioner of a certain form. But it is always interesting also, sometimes your ideas can make you also push you outside of your existing practice. So with that in mind, what I had been reading, strangely also what had happened is that I had been reading about games, and how there is a very interesting connection between game theory and performance, which was written by a very well-known theorist of performance, Richard Schechner. And there was a very interesting aspect of game theory and performance, and I started reading more about it. And the fundamental idea was that game is something which unfolds, right? It's like something which unfolds with each action of a player, any game that you take. In that sense, I thought here it could be interesting that people, the audience, is essentially the players, and they play a game where they have a very simple task to revive a lake. This was really the core of the idea, that how do we really bring people to engage in this, play a game and revive a lake which has a lot of different stakes put together. As I started spending time in the project, and ನಾನು ಒಬ್ಬನೇ ಇರಲಿಲ್ಲ ಆ್ಯಕ್ಚುಲಿ, ನನ್ನ ಜೊತೆಗೆ ಫುಲ್ ಟೀಮ್ ಇತ್ತು. We started with a very small team, but it was it was one of the biggest support systems for me, because to be able to have your team and bounce off ideas, as a team we really went out and met several stakeholders, right from citizen groups to even what in the urban context, the people who work as who also supply to the fisheries department, the fishermen. Then there was also the government officials. There are also the engineers who work on the field from the BBMP. So there were several stakeholders, and idrinda one actually Bengaluru is an IT city or a pensioners paradise. Atara images, or actually atara labels, of course it's true, but what unfolded from there is that a new kind of idea of Bangalore kind of emerged for me, or for the city, at least for me first, because it had to do something to me. But my idea of the city had to change when I met different people in different neighborhoods, and I found that how neighborhood or a city is a very big idea. A city is too big an idea. So I would also encourage, and this is again from a very subjective point of view from my project, it might be very useful to also look at something very specific within a city. So in my case, on the ಆ ಕೆರೆದು ಒಂದು ಕತೆ, ಆ ಕೆರೆ ನಗರದಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಬೇರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಎಷ್ಟು ಜನ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ, ಆ ಕೆರೆದು custodian who's taking care of the lake, everything gives you a context. I feel that is really the crux of developing a project. And then of course we read more about game theory and performance, but honestly that got developed very much into the project as we started the process. We were not sure what it would look like, and you don't need to know exactly what it needs to look like, but I think it's important to know what kind of form would you like to explore. So none practice theater practice, but I was very clear from the beginning that I was not keen to do it in the way I had been doing my practice. So for me the challenges were also to, in that sense, look outside of my practice, and that is not easy. It's not like just because you're looking outside of a practice it's better or it's easier. Not at all. It brings up its own questions, several questions actually, to the fore. But with this I will just quickly go into the sharing some images, and with that images I'll just quickly talk about how what I just mentioned about how the project took shape, what it looked like eventually. And of course COVID played a big role. So COVID, the actually opening show was planned on April 10th 2020 at Kaikondrali Lake, which is where it all started for me. But mid-March is where the lockdown came into effect. So post that a lot of changes happened. Is my screen visible?
Yeah, it's not full screen. We can
Yes.
see all your other slides. Yeah, now.
This is the project. This is what the project was called, Once There Was a Lake. And the game really looked at 5 very different aspects. So this really, the blue is the water, which signified the lake. This was just empty land. This was greenery. This is the buildings and construction that happens around the lake. We have to understand the lakes are not existing outside of the city. They're very much part of the city. So the complexity of saving a lake is 10 times more. It's very complex. It's not easy. It has its own. It's also very much loaded with the politics around the people and the government and everything. And the gray one was really the industry card. So these were the cards for the game. And the reason I'm sharing this is just to give you a context that this is the kind of abstraction of a city map that we created through the game. Because it was important that we could reach out to people through the game, and it didn't have to be too complicated for people to understand or get into the game. From here, if you can look at, this is what a typical game situation would look like. On the left side you will find the player card. So imagine if you're a player, you would be holding these 3 cards. There is a deck in which there are other cards, and this is the main starting board of the game. This is where you start, and this is really the invitation to the players, and we tell the players that you are actually people who live in this neighborhood, which currently looks like this. So now as they start playing the game, their objective is to revive the lake. And I'm just going to show you quick images of how the game develops as the game progresses. You slowly see that the water, the cards which signify water is slowly increasing, and we had created a value where we said that there has to be at least 14 water cards adjacent, ಪಕ್ಕದಲ್ಲಿ water cards ಇರಬೇಕು, 14 water cards ಇರಬೇಕು to say that you have revived and saved the lake. So mostly we used to ensure that people reached that so that they also had a sense of belonging, but we also had sessions where people didn't reach it, and that was also equally interesting. So just to give you a journey of this project, we started very much with our own small community of theatre makers and people within the community to just do some trial. A lot of trial work happened in this process, and that was very important because we were exploring a new form. Dhruv, who you see in the picture, is the game designer who worked on this. He actually worked on this remotely with us, but actually it was amazing the amount of material he could really use from the real world, from the research that we had done, and develop a game design out of it. This is one of the first events we did at the Kaikondrali Kere Habba, which happens in every February. And this is where we did we didn't plan anything. We just asked them for a table and we said we'll just wait for people to come and join. And it was very interesting. We played for we had 3 different groups of people who came over 5 hours. And we had very, very, very interesting questions. We had very interesting conversations that happened. People didn't know each other. So that was also very interesting to see how a very impromptu thing happened there. And that gave us an idea that this format is so interesting because we are so used to in the theater. In that sense, that audience is going to buy a ticket and come. But in this case, we were not really waiting for that. We would just say we'll land up there and we'll see what happens. And it was very interesting to see different people in the neighborhood come and engage with the game. This was one of the sessions where we kept doing these trial sessions to keep evolving the game at different spaces. So the game kind of developed, more stories came in. We went to different groups, and sometimes we invited people, sometimes we just went to a group. This was at a university at Shivnadar. We were invited as part of a conference. And this was at IFA. It's also fun to take your work to the grant to the grant maker's office. It's also interesting to see how the work develops and how how we sort of found the game, how they responded to the game. And that was also this was a very initial stages also, where we were developing it and we were wondering how does this appeal to it. So it was really collaborative in that sense. Every game trial round was very collaborative. It gave us a sense of what people were feeling. This was the final one. We eventually took it to a theater, but we did it at the foyer of Rangashankara. We didn't do it in the auditorium. That was also an interesting experience. Each space opened up a different challenge. However, with the pandemic, I think what we had to do was that we had to make an online version because it was very difficult to ask people to sit in proximity, at least in the initial first two lockdowns. And because of that, we had to create this version where one second, which was an online version. And I'll quickly share, I won't take much time. This was an online version which we created. This is the website, you can visit this later. It's called oncetherewasalake.org. So it was a physical game, but amele we got together and we really decided that let's make a digital game. So this was an online game that we created. So game the rules ಆ game ಇಂದ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ, ಫಾರ್ಮ್ಯಾಟ್ ಡಿಫ್ರೆಂಟ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಬಟ್ ಈ ವೆಬ್ಸೈಟಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಟ್ಯೂಟೋರಿಯಲ್ ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಇದೆ. ಸೊ ಆ ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ವಾಚ್ ದ ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಹೌ ಟು ಪ್ಲೇ ದಿಸ್ ಗೇಮ್ ಆಲ್ಸೋ. Of course, it was a very different idea, but we had to make those changes because we had to, in that sense, reimagine the project. Our game jotege we also created audio stories, because the stories that we were telling people in the physical version that we would sometimes read out, or we would ask them to read out, or we would ask them to enact. We had a script that we would give them and ask them if anybody was willing to enact and read out a character. That had to be brought into this online version. After a lot of trial and error, what we found was that it would be interesting to make an audio story series. So we wrote, I and the team who I worked with, we all created a 6-chapter audio series. You can also listen to all the audio stories here. This is just the prologue, but you can go up and just click on the audio series and you can listen to all the audio stories. But yeah, this was really I would say, the adaptation to the online medium of it. And I want to go back to the physical version. I am already going back to the older version now. We have been in talks with a couple of institutions to see if we can come back and restart the physical version. So that's really the plan, and I hope I'm hoping that sometime by the end of August I want to restart that. A lot of schools, a lot of institutions are interested to try this. So I think that's going to be the starting point, but we do want to go back to the lakes, to the parks, and see how this evolves. So yes, with that I will end my presentation, and yeah, if you have any questions, I look forward to it.
Thank you, Chanakya, for such an energetic presentation about your curatorial process. I'm so glad to share that MD Pallavi has joined us. As you know, MD Pallavi is a Bangalore-based singer, musician, and theater personality. And Pallavi has helped IFA as an expert evaluator to judge the proposals that IFA received under Project 560 last year. And she will also share her experience as a musician who is into curatorial journeys in the city of Bangalore. So I invite Pallavi to share a few words in Kannada, please. Thank you, Pallavi.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು ಜಾನ್. ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಸುರೇಶ್ ಮತ್ತು ಚಾಣಕ್ಯ ಮತ್ತು IFA ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಿಬ್ಬಂದಿಯವರಿಗೆ ಮತ್ತು ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಜೊತೆ ಇರುವಂಥ ಎಲ್ಲ ವೀಕ್ಷಕರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. IFA ಜೊತೆ ಬಹಳ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರೀತಿಯ ನಂಟು ನಂದು. ಅವರು ಯಾವಾಗ ಕರೆದ್ರೂ ಬಹಳ ಸಂತೋಷದಿಂದ ನಾನು ಬಂದು ಅವ್ರ ಜೊತೆ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. ಈ ಒಂದು ಬಹಳ ಯುನೀಕ್ ಆದ ಒಂದು ಏನಂತಾರೆ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್ ಅವ್ರು ನಡೆಸುವ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು 560 ಈ ಒಂದು ಯೋಜನೆ ಇದೇನು ಒಂದು ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮನ್ನು ಅವರು ಕ್ಯೂರೇಟೋರಿಯಲ್ ಇದನ್ನು ನಡೆಸ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ. ಇದನ್ನು ಬಹುಶಃ ಕಲಾವಿದರು ಮತ್ತು ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಕಲೆಯನ್ನು ಕಲಾತ್ಮಕವಾಗಿ ಇದನ್ನು ಕಾಣೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಇಷ್ಟಪಡೋರು ಬಹುಶಃ ಇಂಥ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮಿನ ಒಂದು ನೆರವನ್ನು ಪಡೆದು ಮಾಡೋದು ಬಹಳ ಏನಂತಾರೆ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಹಾಗೂ ಸಮಂಜಸ ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಯಾಕೆಂದರೆ ಒಂದು ಊರನ್ನು ನಾವು ಹೇಗೆ ಕಾಣ್ತೀವಿ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಬಹುಶಃ ಒಂದು ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಅಂತ ಇದ್ದಾಗ, ಒಂದು ಕಲಾವಿದರಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ವೇದಿಕೆ ಅಂತ ಕೊಟ್ಟಾಗ ಅಥವಾ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮ ಅಂತ ಕೊಟ್ಟಾಗ ಅಥವಾ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಷನ್ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ, ಪರ್ಫಾರ್ಮೆನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಮಾಡಿದಾಗ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಹಂಚಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂಥ ಅಥವಾ ಪ್ರದರ್ಶಿಸುವಂಥ ಅಥವಾ ಹೇಳಿಕೊಳ್ಳಬಹುದಾದಂಥ ಯೋಚನೆಗಳು, ಯೋಚನಾ ಲಹರಿಗಳು ಒಂದು ಪರ್ಫಾರ್ಮೆನ್ಸಿನ ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಸೀಮಿತವಾಗಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಆದರೆ IFA ಮಾಡಿರೋ ಈ ಒಂದು ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ಒಂದು ಪ್ಲಸ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಏನಂದರೆ, ನಾವು ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ಈ ಊರನ್ನು ಕಾಣಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಕಾಣಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಅನಿಸಿದ್ರು ಆ ಕಾಣುವಿಕೆಗೆ ನೆರವಾಗುವಂತಹ ಒಂದು ಸಹಾಯ ರಿಸೋರ್ಸ್ ಅವರು ಒದಗಿಸ್ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದು ನನಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಅದ್ಭುತ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ತು. ಅವ್ರು ಮಾಡಿರುವಂಥ ಇಷ್ಟು ವರ್ಷ ಮಾಡಿರುವಂಥ ನೀಡಿರುವಂಥ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ಸ್ಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಹೋದಾಗ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರನ್ನು, ಈ ಊರನ್ನು ಒಂಥರ ಒಂದು ಜೀವಂತ ಲಿವಿಂಗ್ ಬೀಯಿಂಗ್ ಆಗಿ ನೋಡಿದಾಗ ಅದರ ಬೇರೆ 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 ಪದರಗಳು ನಮಗೆ ತೆರೆದುಕೊಳ್ತಾ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಬಹಳ ಅದ್ಭುತ ಅನ್ನಿಸ್ತು ನನಗೆ. ಅದು ಐತಿಹಾಸಿಕವಾಗಿರಬಹುದು ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿಗೆ ಸಂಬಂಧಪಟ್ಟಿರಬಹುದು ಅಥವಾ ಕಲಾತ್ಮಕವಾಗಿರಬಹುದು ಅಥವಾ ಜಿಯೋಗ್ರಫಿಕಲ್ ಇರಬಹುದು. ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿ ಈ ಊರನ್ನು ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನದಿಂದ ನೋಡಬೇಕಾ ಅಥವಾ ಹೊಸ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನದಿಂದ ನೋಡಬೇಕಾ ಅಥವಾ ಯಾವ ದೃಷ್ಟಿಕೋನದಿಂದ ನೋಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನೋ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿದ್ರು, ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಇದ್ರೂ ಆ ಒಂದು ಹುಡುಕಾಟಕ್ಕೆ, ಆ ಒಂದು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲೋರೇಷನ್ಗೆ, ಆ ಒಂದು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆರಿಮೆಂಟೇಷನ್ಗೆ ಅವಕಾಶ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮ್. ಅದು ಬಹಳ ಕಡಿಮೆ ನಮಗೆ ಆ ಥರದ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶಗಳು ಸಿಗೋದು, ಆ ಥರದ ಸಹಾಯಗಳು ಸಿಗೋದು ಅಂತ ನನಗನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಬೇಂದ್ರೆ ಅವರ ಒಂದು ಬಹಳ ಅದ್ಭುತವಾದ ಒಂದು ಕವನ ಇದೆ, ಹೊಸ ದ್ವೀಪಗಳಿಗೆ ಹೊರಟಾನ ಬನ್ನಿ, ಅಂದರೆ ನಾವು ಹೊಸ ದ್ವೀಪಗಳನ್ನು ಕಂಡುಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ ಬನ್ನಿ ಅಂತ. ಹೊಸ ದ್ವೀಪಗಳನ್ನು ಕಂಡುಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ ಅಂದಾಗ ಅವರು ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆ ಸಮುದ್ರದಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ಏನು ದೋಣಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಇದು ಉಪ್ಪು ನೀರ ಕಡಲಲ್ಲೋ ನಮ್ಮ ಒಡಲಲ್ಲೂ ಇದರ ನೆಲೆಯು, ಕಂಡವರಿಗಲ್ಲೋ ಕಂಡವರಿಗಷ್ಟೇ ತಿಳಿದದ ಇದರ ಬೆಲೆಯು, ಸಿಕ್ಕಲ್ಲಿ ಅಲ್ಲ ಸಿಕ್ಕಲ್ಲೇ ಮಾತ್ರ ಒಡೆಯುವುದು ಇದರ ಸೆಲೆಯು, ಕಣ್ ಅರಳಿದಾಗ ಕಣ್ ಹೊರಳಿದಾಗ ಹೊಳೆಯುವುದು ಇದರ ಕಳೆಯು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಊರನ್ನು ನಾವು ನೋಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ ಕಂಡವರಿಗಲ್ಲೋ ಕಂಡವರಿಗಷ್ಟೇ, ಬರೀ ಕಾಣೋದಷ್ಟೇ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಕಾಣಬಹುದಾ, ಹೇಗೆ ಕಾಣಬಹುದು ಊರನ್ನು, ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಕಾಣಬಹುದು ಊರನ್ನು, ಕಾಣುವಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು ನಮ್ಮ ಮನಸ್ಸಿನ, ನಮ್ಮ ಬುದ್ಧಿಯ, ನಮ್ಮ ಚಿತ್ತದ, ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರಜ್ಞೆಯ ಯಾವ ಏನಂತಾರೆ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೀರಿಯನ್ಸನ್ನು ನಾವು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಹಚ್ಚಿ ಒಂದು ಊರನ್ನು ಕಾಣೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಊರನ್ನು ನಾವು ಊರ ಜೊತೆ ಸ್ಪಂದಿಸೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ ಹುಡುಕಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹಳ ಅದ್ಭುತವಾದ ಒಂದು ವೇದಿಕೆ ಅಂತ ನನಗನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪದ್ಯ ಇದೆ ಕುವೆಂಪು ಅವ್ರದ್ದು. ಅವ್ರು ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಎಲ್ಲಿರುವುದು ನಾ ಸೇರುವ ಊರು, ಎಲ್ಲಿದೆ, ಯಾರೂ ಕಾಣದ ಯಾರೂ ಅರಿಯದ ಅಂಥ ಊರು ಇದೆಯಾ ಅಂತ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಅವ್ರು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ಬೇರೆ ಊರಿಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೇಕು ಅಂತಲ್ಲ, ಈ ಊರು ನನಗಿನ್ನೂ ನನ್ನ ಊರು ಸಿಕ್ಕಿಲ್ಲ, ಆ ಊರು ಯಾವುದು, ಆ ಊರನ್ನ ನಾ ಹುಡುಕ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ, ಎಲ್ಲಿರುವುದು ನಾ ಸೇರುವ ಊರು, ಆ ಊರನ್ನ ಹುಡುಕಾಡೋ.
Just one sec. I think there's a problem with the translation. Just one sec. Krishna, will you do the translation for everyone, please? Because I think there's some connection problem there. Yeah, thank you, Krishna.
Yeah, it's a little fast,
Sorry.
no? Sorry, Pallavi.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Should I go slower?
It's all right.
Yeah,
Just
it's okay,
do
fine,
it.
fine.
Do it to everyone and not just the host.
Yeah. I got
Acha,
it. I got it.
Should I speak slower? Sorry.
No, it's
continue,
okay.
continue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
ಸೊ ಎಲ್ಲಿರುವುದು ನಾ ಸೇರುವ ಊರು ಅಂತಿದೆಯಲ್ಲ, ನಾನು ಸೇರುವ ದ ಊರು ಆರ್ ದ ಸಿಟಿ, ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು, ವಾಟ್ ಎವರ್ ಇಟ್ ಇಸ್, ದ ಊರು ದಟ್ ಐ ಬಿಲಾಂಗ್ ಟು, ವೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ಇಟ್, ಆ ಹುಡುಕಾಟದಲ್ಲಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಕುವೆಂಪು ಅವರು. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಬ್ಬರ ಹುಡುಕಾಟವೂ ಇರುತ್ತೆ, ಈ ಊರು ಯಾವುದು, ವೇರ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ಹಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿಸ್ ಸಿಟಿ, ವಾಟ್ ಡು ಐ ರೆಸ್ಪಾಂಡ್ ಟು, ಹೌ ಡು ಐ ರೆಸ್ಪಾಂಡ್ ಟು ಇಟ್, ನಾನು ಹೇಗೆ ಇದರ ಜೊತೆ ಸ್ಪಂದಿಸ್ಬೋದು, ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಏನು ಕಾಣ್ತೀನಿ, ನನಗೇನು ಕಾಣಿಸುತ್ತೆ ಈ ಊರಲ್ಲಿ, ನಾನು ಯಾವ ಒಂದು ಬಣ್ಣದಲ್ಲಿ ಇದನ್ನು ಕಾಣ್ತೀನಿ, ನಾವು ಯಾವ ಒಂದು ಏನಂತಾರೆ ಡೈಮೆನ್ಷನ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ಇದನ್ನು ಕಾಣ್ತೀನಿ, ನನಗೆ ಯಾರು ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾರೆ ಈ ಊರಲ್ಲಿ, ಅದು ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ನನಗೆ ಯಾರು ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾರೆ, ನನಗೆ ಬೀದಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಓಡಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋರು ಕಾಣಿಸ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ನನಗೆ ಬಿಲ್ಡಿಂಗಲ್ಲಿರೋರು ಕಾಣಿಸ್ಬೋದು, ಅಥವಾ ನನಗೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿಯ ಪ್ರಾಣಿ ಪಕ್ಷಿಗಳು ಕಾಣಿಸ್ಬಹುದು, ಇಲ್ಲಿಯ ಬರೀ ಆಕಾಶವೇ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ಬೋದು. ನನಗೆ ಈ ಊರು, ನನಗೆ ಈ ಊರಲ್ಲಿ ಏನು ಕಾಣುತ್ತೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿಗೂ ಉತ್ತರಗಳನ್ನು ಹುಡುಕುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ಅವಕಾಶ ಇರುವಂಥ ವೇದಿಕೆ ಅದು. ಐ ರಿಯಲಿ ಥಿಂಕ್ ಐ ಅಡ್ಮೈರ್ ದಿಸ್ whoever thought of this idea of this project, this program. ಇದು ಎಷ್ಟು ಸ್ಪೇಷಿಯಸ್ ಆಗಿದೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ರೀತಿಯ ಯೋಚನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಅಕಾಮಡೇಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಸ್ಥಳಾವಕಾಶ ಇದೆ ಈ ವೇದಿಕೆಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ ವೇದಿಕೆ ಇದು. ಒಂದು ಊರನ್ನು ಹೇಗೆ ಕಾಣಬಹುದು, ಆ ಊರು ಅಂದಾಗ ಅದರೊಳಗೆ ಜೀವಂತವಿಲ್ಲದಿರುವ ಮರ, ಗಿಡ, ಪಕ್ಷಿಗಳು, ಪ್ರಾಣಿಗಳು, ರಸ್ತೆಗಳು, ಆರ್ಕಿಟೆಕ್ಚರ್, ಹಿಸ್ಟ್ರಿ ಇರುವ, ಭೂತದ, ಭವಿಷ್ಯದ, ಈಗ ಇರುವ ಎಲ್ಲದರ ಒಂದು ಅರಿವು ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇರುವಂಥ, ಬದುಕ್ತಾ ಇರುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ಊರಿನ ಕಲ್ಪನೆಯನ್ನು, ಒಂದು ಊರಿಗೆ ಸ್ಪಂದಿಸುವಂಥ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಕೇಳುವಂಥ ಪ್ರಪೋಸಲ್ಗಳಿಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಅದ್ಭುತವಾದ ಏನಂತಾರೆ ಸಹಾಯವನ್ನು ನೀಡುವಂಥ ಒಂದು ವೇದಿಕೆ. ಸೊ ಪ್ರತಿ ವರ್ಷವೂ ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಬರುವಂಥ ಏನಂತಾರೆ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ಗಳಿರಬಹುದು, ಅಥವಾ ಇವಾಗ ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಇಬ್ಬರು ಮಾತಾಡಿದ್ದನ್ನು ಕೇಳಿದ್ವಿ, ಸುರೇಶ್ ಅವರು ಮತ್ತು ಚಾಣಕ್ಯ ಅವರು. ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ಅವರು ತಮ್ಮ ಹುಡುಕಾಟಗಳನ್ನು ಈ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಕ್ಯೂರೇಟೋರಿಯಲ್ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ. ಸುರೇಶ್ ಅವರ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟೇ ಒಂದು, ಅದರ ಛಾಯೆಯೇ ಬೇರೆ, ಅದರ ಕಲ್ಪನೆಯೇ ಬೇರೆ, ಅದರ ಇಂಟೆನ್ಷನ್ನೇ ಬೇರೆ, ಅದರ ಹುಡುಕಾಟವೇ ಬೇರೆ. ಚಾಣಕ್ಯ ಅವ್ರದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಏನಂತಾರೆ, ಅದರ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟಿನ ಒಂದು ಫೌಂಡೇಶನ್ನೇ ಬೇರೆ, ಅದರ ತಳಪಾಯವೇ ಬೇರೆ, ಅದರ ದಾರಿಯೇ ಬೇರೆ. ಸೊ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ರೀತಿಯ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿಗೂ ಅವಕಾಶಗಳಿದೆ. ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳು ಮಾತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲ, ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಗಳಿಗೂ ಅವಕಾಶವಿದೆ. ಸ್ಟೇಟ್ಮೆಂಟ್ಗಳು ಮಾತ್ರವಲ್ಲ, ಯೋಚನೆಗಳು, ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲೋರೇಷನ್ಗಳಿಗೂ ಅವಕಾಶವಿದೆ. ಅದು ಬಹಳ ನನಗೆ ಅದ್ಭುತ ಅಂತ ನನಗೆ ಅನಿಸುತ್ತೆ. ಐ ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಆಸ್ಕ್ ಬೋತ್ ಸುರೇಶ್ ಆ್ಯಂಡ್ ಚಾಣಕ್ಯ, ಮೊದಲನೇದಾಗಿ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಲ್, ವಾಟ್ ಡು ಯು ಥಿಂಕ್ Bangalore represents? What are maybe the 3 or 4 words that come to your mind when I say Bengaluru?
I think it's like a kaleidoscope, a cosmopolitan kaleidoscope, multicultural, multiple city. There's everything you want in India, you can find in Bangalore. I think this cosmopolitanism is also there in a, in a botanical way. Whether you look at Lal Bagh and Kaban Park, you see trees from all over the world coming here, rooting, flowering, and making this what it is. But at the same time, I think this project gives you many lenses to look at the city. It gives you a camera to record, it gives you a microscope to go deeper inside, and finally, it gives you a mirror to look at your own self. I think that is very important that this it asks you many questions. It also gives you an opportunity to identify your own self and your role in this multiple city. And for somebody like me who's a Bangalorean, the discovery is enormous. And I think this project has never stopped. And we kept wondering that when is our IFA project officially stopped? So it's going on in our minds constantly. We want to do something else. IFA is not time bound. It's constantly like Arundhati and the whole team who are somehow become very close friends now are constantly there in our minds when we always looking at some part of Bangalore and want to represent it in another way. And we have these many archival projects which we have already indulged in, and we also envision many things for the city in the future.
I think for me, Bangalore is like a medley. It's like a remix. So, Nange actually, if I go, for me, it's very interesting that in Bangalore, it's very difficult to just listen to one language. You usually end to listen, like having traveled in my initial years in Bangalore a lot in BMTC. That's where I picked up my broken Kannada, and and just to listen to different languages, and then later on, even if you go to different neighborhoods, I think Bangalore really shifts if you go into a very upscale or a very commercial district kind of a neighborhood, and you just take a turn inside and you find a completely different Bangalore. So it's also like a maze. You suddenly find that, oh, this is not really like what the main road looks like. So I find that kind of difference is so interesting in Bangalore. And for me, the word medley remix comes because just yesterday I was in JP Nagar and I stopped by to this very, very well known place that I've not been for so long, and to have neer dosa. And I just stopped, and everyone around me was taking gobi Manchurian and masala puri and this and that. So for me, it was also very interesting that this place is like serving like 15-20 different varieties of things. And it feels like, okay, you get this everywhere, but you don't get this everywhere. Actually, if you go to cities, you don't get this kind of variety at a lot of places. I'm sure every city has its own flavor. But for me, Bangalore is like, I would say, a maze and a bit like a medley. It's like a remix. So you don't know what you want to listen to if you just move from one place to the other. And I think that's really, for me, it kind of gives me that surprise, or like Suresh says, there's a discovery. I would say there's a discovery at every turn in that sense, So I find that very exciting.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು. ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ನಂದು, ಇದು ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಇಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋರು ಬಹುಶಃ ಮುಂದೆ ಈ ಗ್ರಾಂಟ್ಗೆ ಅಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು, ಮತ್ತು ಇದನ್ನ ಲಾಭವನ್ನು ಪಡ್ಕೋಬೇಕು, ಇದರ ಸಹಾಯವನ್ನು ಪಡಿಬೇಕು ಅಂತಿರೋರಿಗೆ ಒಂಥರ ಒಂದು ಸೂಚನಾತ್ಮಕವಾಗಿ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಯನ್ನು ನಾನು ಕೇಳ್ತೀನಿ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಉತ್ತರ ಸಿಕ್ಕಿದ್ರೆ ಬಹುಶಃ ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಸಹಾಯ ಆಗ್ಬೋದು ಅನಿಸುತ್ತೆ. ಮುಖ್ಯವಾಗಿ ಈ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟಲ್ಲಿ, ಪ್ರೋಗ್ರಾಮಲ್ಲಿ ನೀವು ಅಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಂದ್ರೆ ಯು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಅ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್ ಆರ್ ಸಮಥಿಂಗ್, ಎನ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪ್ಲೋರೇಷನ್, ಎನ್ ಐಡಿಯಾ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ಹ್ಯಾಸ್ ಪ್ರೈಮರಿಲಿ ಸಮಥಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಡೂ ವಿತ್ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರು ದ ಸಿಟಿ. ಈ ಸಿಟಿಯನ್ನು, ಈ ಊರನ್ನು ಒಂದು ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ ಡ್ರಾಪೋ ಫೋರ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡೋ ಏನೋ ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ರೀತಿಯಲ್ಲಿ ನೋಡುವ, ಪರಿಶೀಲಿಸುವ, ಪ್ರಶ್ನಿಸುವ, ಹುಡುಕುವ, ಯಾವುದಾದ್ರೂ ಇರಬಹುದು. ಅದು ಆ ಥರದ ಒಂದು ಯೋಚನೆ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಸಹಾಯಕ್ಕೆ ಅಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡೋದು. ಆದರೆ ಯಾವ ಹಂತದಲ್ಲಿ ಈಗ ನಾನು ಅಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ಅನ್ಸತ್ತೆ ನಿಮಗೆ? ಲೈಕ್ ಇಸ್ ದೇರ್ ಅ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ವೆನ್ ಯು ಸೇ ಓಕೆ ನೌ ಯು ಥಿಂಕ್ ಯು ಶುಡ್ ಅಪ್ಲೈ, now you should apply? Until then, think about it or whatever. Like, what is that point when you say, okay, this is when you should apply, or what should you already have to apply? ಇಬ್ರು ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ಸೊ ಇದು ನೋಡೋರ್ಗೆ ಸಹಾಯ ಆಗಬಹುದು ಅಂತ.
I think if you have a very strong idea and you have a passion for the city, you will obviously take that idea and elaborate it. You'll try to find out different ways of intersecting into this city as a map, a city as a multiple space, and it's according to your own individual capacity that you could really focus on, whether it's the architecture or build spaces, the lakes or the gardens, or it could be individuals. So these are the many ways that you could look at the city. But what is interesting is that it's just not archival. It could be the current living contemporary context of who you are, where you are, and how do you negotiate the city. Because the city has multiple possibilities, and I think there are many, many ways of looking at the city. And I think this is an opportunity for everybody. You need not be an art historian like me, but you could be somebody who's just curious, and you could really take advantage of this project and really go for it, have conversations with the IFA staff, and make that a reality. And it's what is necessary is just passion. And writing a project will happen automatically, and obviously everything will fall into place. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for anybody who loves this city to take this challenge and apply, because each one of us are so unique, and we can bring a different unique perspective to Bengaluru and our city, and that could be a very archival thing for the future generations to look at the city in that perspective.
Yeah, I think I would say that I think once you've found an idea, after that I think it would be wonderful if you could spend some time on just trying to maybe see how who are the people who are connected to their idea outside of you. So there could be an observation. So for me, there was an observation of lakes, for example. Now that is just an idea or an observation that the lakes are being revived. That maybe remains at a very local, at a very basic level, or the fact that I want to make a game based on this. For me, the idea took the next step when I actually realized that in every neighborhood there was a different story, and everyone expected a different version of the lake. Everyone did not just want a lake. People wanted some people wanted it to be only for biodiversity. Some people wanted it to be for amusement. Some people said it's for senior citizens to work, which I think gave me a perspective that how everybody expects something from a common space, and what is that common space in that sense. So other than that, I went into finding what I call in my process is anchors. So idea admele who are the anchors on whom you can expand the idea. Like Suresh's project looks at the city in such a multiple, kind of a way. So there are these different anchors that he was also showing through, in his presentation through the images. So for me, the anchors were different citizen groups or different stakeholders that I was meeting. So I think once that is done, I think the next step, which is important, which I feel should give you that step to say now you can apply, is what do you want to do to the audience? Audience here, I also don't mean only in a traditional theatre sense, but it could be anybody who's attending your this thing, even if they're just coming to watch an installation. I feel it's an important question to ask. What do you want to do to the audience? And this could be anything really, but I think outlining that really helps. I can speak from my example. For example, we had these words which I actually took out from my proposal which I wrote 2 years ago. The words that I used were I wanted the audience to engage in a playful manner. I wanted them to interact. I wanted them to be in a participatory form. And at some point, I also wanted them to, in one sense, tell about these things through stories. So tell about the story of the lakes through, through kind of stories from fictional and real. So I think this should be enough, I feel, to be able to say, okay, this is at a stage where the idea is not just an idea, but it has a perspective. if I can put it that way. And I think it's important to tell what your perspective is on that in your proposal, so that I think it's clear that what you're trying to do with that. Yeah.
ಮತ್ತೆ ನಾನು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಬಹುಶಃ IFA ದವ್ರನ್ನೇ ಕೇಳ್ತೀನಿ ನಾನು. ಈಗ ಯಾವ ಗಾತ್ರದ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟನ್ನು ತರಬಹುದು ಇದಕ್ಕೆ? ಹೌದು, ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಬಡ್ಜೆಟ್ ಇದೆ, ಒಂದು ಫಂಡ್ ಇದೆ, ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ನೀವು ಅಪ್ಲೈ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. ಆದರೆ ಯಾವ ಗಾತ್ರದ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಬಹಳ ದೊಡ್ಡ, ಇವಾಗ ಒಂದು ಪುಸ್ತಕವನ್ನು ನಾನು ಬರಿಬೇಕು, ನಾನು ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಏನಂತಾರೆ ಇದನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿ ಓದ್ಕೊಂಡು ಇದನ್ನು ಹುಡುಕಾಟ ಮಾಡಿ ಸೋರ್ಸ್ಗಳನ್ನು ಹುಡುಕಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಾಡಿ ಆ ಪುಸ್ತಕವನ್ನು ರಿಸರ್ಚ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಬರೆಯೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹುಶಃ 4-5 ವರ್ಷಗಳಾಗಬಹುದು. ಆದರೆ ಅದರ ಒಂದು ಭಾಗಕ್ಕೆ ಬಹುಶಃ ಇಂಟರ್ವ್ಯೂಗಳು ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ನನಗೆ ಈ IFA ಫಂಡ್ ಸಿಗುತ್ತಾ, ಅಥವಾ ಪ್ರಿಂಟ್ಗೆ ನನಗೆ ಈ IFA ಫಂಡ್ ಸಿಗುತ್ತಾ, ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದು ಜಾಗಕ್ಕೆ ಹೋಗಿ ಒಂದು ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿಯನ್ನು ಮಾತಾಡಿಸಿ ಅಷ್ಟರ ಮಟ್ಟಿಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ಅದು ಒಂದು ಪಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, ಕಂಪ್ಲೀಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗೆ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು ಅಂತ ನನಗನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಆದರೆ ನಾನು ಇನ್ನೂ ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ಅರ್ಥ ಆಗಲಿ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ಈ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳನ್ನು ಕೇಳ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ. ನಿಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿಬ್ಬರು ಯಾರಾದರೂ ಆನ್ಸರ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಓಕೆ, ಅಥವಾ ಇಫ್ either John or Arundhati can answer that question, that would be great. Should I ask? Yeah, that's right. Krishna said.
John, you want to take that?
I didn't completely understand.
There are, so let me just say it in English, that, there is a fixed fund for this grant and program. So what should that limit the scope of the project? That I can only think this much because I have this much money. Or is it possible that I think of a bigger project and then ask and apply for a part of that project to be funded by this fund? It could be a 10-year project that I'm thinking of in a way to engage with the city, or it could be something that is very, a bigger budget than this budget. In any way, can I apply to say, okay, a part of that can can this fund be this thing?
Thank you, Pallavi, for that question. So it can be a larger curatorial vision of which a part funding can also be applied for. So if it's a longer process, then you can mention that is episodic and one episode you're applying for. Or if it's within 1 year and if it's a larger project and it's part that you're applying for, you can freely and honestly tell us that, and we will consider the application in that context only.
Just to add what John said, I think Suresh has a lifetime project, forget 10 years. Of doing Bangalore, of archiving Bangalore. From the time I've come to Bangalore, I think I have known Suresh as somebody who's chronicling, talking about. So in his case, I think it was a short window in his huge expansive life that IFA was very delighted to be part of and part now. In a very different way, Chanakya's own practice have had many episodes. And one of those episodes is when he wanted to work with this city and gaming. I've been hearing Chanakya talk for quite some time about the idea of commons and the city, but we didn't know, even many of us who've heard him speak about this, that it would arrive in this avatar and in this form and shape. So like John said, what is important though in this category is to have those public engagements, because the curated engagements is what you're looking at. That has to be very specific. So it can't be, for example, if you have a lifetime project, that I'm going to just support the research part of it. We are looking at, even if you say the research, then even the research findings you should share with a larger public, because the public engagement part is critical to this category. There is another category where you can apply for research and practice about the city, but not in this one. You can also ask for multiple support. So you can come to us. That's also open, right, John? That
Yeah,
they
totally.
can come to us and they can go to other people. Just tell us that. To others.
Like in the case of Suresh Jayaram, Goethe Institute also supported
Yes,
Bangalore
yes.
Connect.
Yes, a part of it. And we've had, I'm sure we'll have other projects which take on new form. I had one question for Pallavi, for you and the other two speakers, if I may. Yeah. So, one difficulty already Chanakya has mentioned, that from idea to project, just having a great idea is not good enough. But another thing that all of us at IFA sometimes struggle with, there is a lot of work we've been getting recently to do with communities, engaging communities, specifically communities that are marginalized within the city. It could be the community of construction workers, it could be the community of sex workers, it could be the community of children coming from difficult backgrounds, but communities who essentially find it hard to find their own voice, and artists in engagement with these communities want to create. But what often we find missing is the community's voice in the project. So it seems like it's the artist orchestrated, and there is very little agency that we see as people reading proposals. So I was wondering if all three of you in different ways have worked with communities within and outside of the IFA realm. If you could share with us what, and especially with applicants who may be in the audience today, what do you think one should do what is the most ethical way to function when you're working with communities, especially if you're looking at funding, because you are looking at money coming in. We've had questions, when we've asked, but what are you paying the community? In the budget, we see all the money going to artists. And there's like, oh, but we are doing it for them. So it gets very tricky on the angles of ethics, on the angles of authority, agency. What would your suggestions be for people who have the heart, but what is the ethical process of going about it?
I think ethically sharing the grant with the community is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are, and I think you can be the person to curate this project, but you should allow the voice of the community to speak for itself rather than be a spokesperson. And I think all budgets and all final outcome has to be shared with the community, and it is owned by the artist or the the curator, but it's owned by everybody. So I think this is what I think is ethical and moral.
ನನಗನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ ಇದು ತುಂಬ ಸೂಕ್ಷ್ಮವಾದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ. ಇದು it's a very sensitive kind of I don't mean it's a sensitive question. It's something that needs to be sensitively thought through. ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ಪ್ರಪೋಸಲ್ ಬಂದಾಗಲೂ ಅಥವಾ ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ಯೋಚನೆ, ಐಡಿಯಾ, ಪ್ರಪೋಸಲ್, ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಬಂದಾಗಲೂ ಆ ಪ್ರಪೋಸಲ್ಲಿನ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಏನು, ಮೇನ್ ಇಂಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಏನು, ಮತ್ತು ಇವಾಗ ಒಂದು ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಇನ್ವಾಲ್ವ್ ಆಗಿದೆ ಅಂದರೆ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಪ್ರಪೋಸಲ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಿರೋದು ಯಾರು, ಅವರು ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ ಒಳಗಡೆ ಇದ್ದಾರಾ ಹೊರಗಡೆ ಇದ್ದಾರಾ, ಅದು ಮುಖ್ಯ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಮತ್ತು ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ಅವರು ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿಯೊಂದಿಗೆ ಹೇಗೆ ಒಡನಾಟ, ಹೌ ಆರ್ ದೇ ಗೋಯಿಂಗ್ ಟು ಎಂಗೇಜ್ ವಿತ್ ದಟ್ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿ, ಅದು ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ಅದು ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿಯನ್ನು ಒಳಪಡಿಸ್ಕೊಂಡು ಆ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಏನು ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಇಂಟೆನ್ಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ದಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್? Is it to showcase the community? Is it to question the community? Is it to push them in a certain direction? Is it to make them aware of something? Is it to just observe them? There are many different subtle things that need to be points that need to be thought of while either writing the proposal or also while reading it and asking questions about it. ಪ್ರತಿಯೊಂದು ನಾವು ಚಾಯ್ಸನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿದಾಗಲೂ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು 10 ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳು ಬರುತ್ತೆ. ಆ 10 ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿಗೂ ಸರಿಯಾದ ಉತ್ತರ, ನಮಗೆ ಎಥಿಕಲ್ ಆದ ಉತ್ತರಗಳನ್ನು ನಾವು ಹುಡುಕಬೇಕು. ಆ ಹುಡುಕಾಟ ಮಾಡಿ ಆಮೇಲೆ ಆ ಕಮ್ಯುನಿಟಿಯನ್ನು ನಾವು ಏನಂತಾರೆ, ಟೇಕಿಂಗ್ ದೆಮ್ ಇನ್ ಟು ಕಾನ್ಫಿಡೆನ್ಸ್, their trust, their confidence, and sharing with them ಯಾವ ರೀತಿಯ ಪ್ರೊಸೆಸ್ ಇರಬಹುದು, ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಎಂಡ್ ಪ್ರಾಡಕ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿಸ್, is there an end product to this project proposal, is there nothing, is there just is it just a participatory kind of a proposal. ಎಲ್ಲ ರೀತಿಯ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆಗಳಿಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಕ್ಲಾರಿಟಿಯಿಂದ ಉತ್ತರಗಳನ್ನ ನಾವು ಹುಡುಕಿರ್ಬೇಕು ಬಿಫೋರ್ ರೈಟಿಂಗ್ or before submitting the proposal, especially when it comes to community work or anything to do with communities. ಇದೆಲ್ಲದಕ್ಕೂ ನಮ್ಮ ಮನಸ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ಕ್ಲಾರಿಟಿ ಇದ್ದು ಉತ್ತರಗಳಿದ್ರೆ ಅವಾಗ ಐ ಥಿಂಕ್ possibilities of something going even mildly wrong are very less.
I had a question, but before that, I would like to take up a question from the audience. So Rainy KS has a question, so I'll allow her to talk. Rainy, would you like to share your question?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks. It's been really a very insightful one. So I am a textile designer, and something. I mean, I am considerably new to Bangalore. It's been 9 years, and the city has given me lots and lots of experiences, and there are a lot of topics that are very close to my heart. So one such topic I took forward during the lockdown, and I sort of, during the lockdown period, I collected about 22 participants from the city, and I had mentored them for textile upcycling. I keep doing those workshops, and in which we took the balconies, like people had gone to working with their hands, which is what I promote in my workshops. So we took the gardens that flourished during the lockdown, we took that as a theme, and I sensitized them with photography and artwork, and then kids from 7-year-olds till 70-year-olds, people who had never threaded a needle. So we spread it over 6 months, and everything was upcycled. Lockdown, nobody could buy anything, and the beauty was none of the participants met each other. We all were locked in our own houses. And we built, each person, they built a patch of textile, and the theme was all the botanicals, and how we all emotionally became close to each other, strangers, nobody knew anybody, exchanging our emotions. And eventually what I did, I collected all those pieces, and I built a community screen, which we showcased in the India International Quilt Fair, where we received a Visitor's Choice Award. The quilt traveled to UK, where received an award there. So the thing is, I was passionate about this entire thing, about the topic.
Reni, if I may, since we are running short on time, if you could come to the question quickly. And we can always have these discussions with IFA later on.
I'm so sorry. So the thing why I was talking was this, that I have a few ideas, but I cannot think of the proposal, like about the water solution, the water problem in the city, then about the variety of food that we get in the city, different cuisines. So I have a lot of ideas and experiences related to the city, but can I like collaborate with somebody? I don't know how to find a team, and if I can discuss my ideas with IFA, and if we could move forward, not necessarily for this, but for something else. I would just want to explore whatever I can offer.
So Rainy, you can write to me on my email address, which is john@indiaifa.org, and we can initiate a conversation about it. So that's a short answer to your question. Now I'll go back to Chanakya. Would you like to share your thoughts on what Arundhati asked regarding ethics of engaging with the community?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add to what Suresh and Pallavi already said. I feel like there is this question, and I've also been thinking about this. Thank you for asking this question, Arundhati. I've been thinking about this because there are. It's, I think, important to ask: are you making work with the community? Are you making work for the community? Are you making work about the community? Are you making work inspired from the community? I think there are all these layers to talk about when you talk about community.
There is also, are you making work in spite of the community?
In spite of the community. Yeah. And I also want to add this here that community, the word, of course, has a very positive connotation, but it's also important that what your project is, you might end up meeting a community, you might end up spending time with the community, and you have to also acknowledge the fact that you might disagree. Let's say you disagree with something on that on some level. And I feel in a project where you are creating some work, I think a disagreement is a great thing to have in order to kind of look at a collaboration. But I feel like in many ways I can speak a little bit about what I encountered with respect to community, because I met different citizen groups looking at different visions of what they expected or what they think about a lake, in their neighborhood. I feel for me, it was not about representing a community in that sense, or it was actually about creating a sense of community in the event itself. So for me, the idea of playing the game was actually an intent that, okay, we'll have people who will actually take decisions that nobody else on the table will agree with. But it still, can there be a sense? For me, I was just trying to create a sense of the community. So I feel like that clarity has to be there. So if someone, because you just started by saying someone wants to work with construction workers, just saying, for example, I feel within that also it's very important to know, because then what if they move after 4 months, right? You are not going to be able to create work with them, right? If you're going to create work about them, maybe one thing, and what has already been shared, but one step could be, of course, you could go back to them and tell them, this is what I have created based on my conversations with you. I have done that in the past, and sometimes the response is never there, because sometimes they have moved on. Sometimes they have also moved on. So I feel the answer to this is, of course, very complicated. I'm not saying there is an answer, but I think what I feel from my understanding is with the community, for the community, inspire the community, as you said, inspired from the community. I think those things can clarify questions around, what could be the ethical concerns with the work. Yeah.
John, there is a question for you. Is it only for Bangalore artists?
So it's for artists from anywhere, but the project has to be based in Bangalore, as in the year-long curated events have to be executed and implemented within Bangalore as real events. So primarily for Bangalore-based artists and curators, but the events have to be implemented within Bangalore.
John, since we have these 3 Bangalore artists with us, and right now I can't see another question. Shall we ask all the questions that we had for them?
Sure.
Okay. I have another question for the 3 of you. I'm sure John has too. My question is to do with, we often, recently actually, even in films and theater and poetry, there's a lot of conversation around cities. And this, even for visual artists, city as studio, city as canvas, city as different things. Now, when coming to Bangalore, because all 3 of you in different ways said, kaleidoscope, multiple Bangalores, so many stories, people like us who've come and settled in Bangalore and now consider ourselves this our home. We are another kind of Bangalorean. This question about what are the priority questions to ask about Bangalore? What questions do we ask? And how do we know, is there a way about which all 3 of you have worked in such different aspects of Bangalore? Where did your questions come from? Chanakya actually mentioned in his presentation today how he was inspired and the water and lake and its connection. But Pallavi and Suresh, these 2 are really questions about you, Suresh. You've been a Bangalorean all your life. What inspired this quest for knowing Bangalore yourself and then going out there and telling people like us what Bangalore is? And Pallavi, in your case as well, you've been involved in so many different kinds of Explore Bangalore projects, if I may call them, under one umbrella. Where does the question come from?
Can I take this question? Um, for me, I think it's a way of life being a Bangalorean that to ask these questions, but also my work constantly from my college days has been inquiry into identity and the city and the urban context of the city. So it has been a long process. It's not been a project that has emerged or an interest that has emerged. It's always been like, what is that of Bangalore that I want to look at? Its people, its biodiversity, its environment, its multiculturalism. So it's endless. So I feel, and I also make sure that whenever I meet somebody who is a non-Bangalorean and make them feel at home, either take them for a walk or like feed them with some dosa from Vidyarthi Bhavan or something like that. So they get a sense of what the city is all about. So I think that has been part of my existence in the city. But making it into a project or a book or a film, etc., is another way of looking at what I'm already looking at. So it's just the context differs. That's it.
Pallavi, for you?
I think not importantly, I'm drawn towards what has been the trajectory of cultural practices in the city, of which communities, and this is again kind of looking at the past historical kind of insights into it, and why did it form the way it did, and because of the way that the city is so, it has so many different what do you say, nadis, pulses, like many pulse points across the city. People in South Bangalore think like Baswangudi is Bangalore, and people in cantonment think this is Bangalore, and Malleshwaram is like another Bangalore in itself. And again, Lalbagh, people around Lalbagh think that is Bangalore. So there are so many pulse points across Bengaluru, and the people who live there have had their own trajectories of what do you call the city rituals that we kind of grow into and practice, and kind of the community around us starts practicing. That is very interesting for me about the city, like how does the heart of the city beat, that all that adds the nerves, the heart of the city, the blood, how does it flow across the city, the air and all that. And also I think like practices which kind of have this kind of a crossover between ancient and modern, and traditional and modern, and religious and non-religious, and like Kadlekai per se has like such a interesting 2 feet in it's a fair, it's a mela, but it's also the Basava, which is myth of Basava coming and eating all the kadlekais that we have thrown on the streets, and that there is a real Basava that will come in the night and eat all the groundnut peels, or the Karaga, or these kinds of or Tipu Sultan's palace, or all these kinds of what do you say, images, symbols, practices that exist within the city, and people who are connected to it and people who are not connected to it, but yet walk on those roads, eat the kadlekai, participate and somehow become a part of it. All this contributes to my understanding of the city, and to look at completely in a different way the cross sections of class, caste, communities, everything, the traffic, non-traffic, parks, non-parks, like it all becomes like one big being that's constantly throwing out interpretations towards me all the time. So I guess it's difficult to answer this question in simplistically. There are so many things that come to one's mind.
Thanks, Pallavi.
Should I speak, or do we have any other questions?
Donna has a question.
So we have time for one more question, so I will share. So I was just thinking that you have been curatorially involved with the city at a time which was extremely challenging, which was the COVID years. So my curiosity is how did you find yourself as curators, or what did you learn about yourself as curators during these COVID years as cultural practitioners and curators in the city? Um, so has it been, how has been the learnings as far as curatorial practice is concerned?
I think it gave us a kind of a, it was like a gap year in our kind of calendar. It gave us time to reflect uh, about the city in a context where everybody was mostly indoors. It was a very photogenic city also for many of us who wanted to photograph without traffic, etc. But at the same time, it gave us this kind of a, the grant was like a catalyst. It was just behind our mind saying, okay, let us finish this in this um, time frame and do the best. So it was a lot of Zoom calls. It was this opportunity that we took, and somehow we realized that uh, our minds also worked best because we did not have anything else to do, and we just focused on these projects. And to speak for myself, I think we overdid it.
Pallavi?
It was very bittersweet, I guess. Like you had a lot of time for yourself, your family, which was great, but also you didn't have work. Uh, and artists, I think that was one big thing. Like people who had jobs, I guess, worked from home, which was another kind of a challenge. But for freelance artists, there was no work for 2 years, which was a big challenge. And hence, there were many different kinds of, people stepping out to, do all kinds of fundraising and stepping out to help. And it was very uh, I think it was difficult to ask questions artistically because the situation felt so immediate and urgent that it seemed like there were bigger questions to ask in terms of, like, how to be able to live, first of all, how to have access to food and medicine and, a shelter, or these kinds of questions, where I think a lot of theater people I know stepped out and helped, and artists I know also were trying to do their best to help communities where a kind of a daily wage was a big, this thing. So it's difficult to pinpoint and say artistically was it possible to do anything, or curatorially. It was more like, I guess, this kind of, I have time to breathe now. I have time to be at home and think about my practice and my questions in life. And then yet it was not that. It was about, oh my God, what's happening, and how do I respond to this, and how do I kind of connect and be able to be of some service. So it was very confusing, I should say.
Yeah, I think I had phases. I think the first phase really was when it happened was, I think one just felt one just didn't feel correct to do anything with respect to curation or art or anything. One just felt like maybe this is really not the time to create something. Maybe this is really time to see what was happening, because every day was, in that sense, new things were unfolding. I feel as time went by in the pandemic, I feel one of the things I can speak from my practice at least is one had to learn new skills. I think one had to learn new things. One had to accept the fact that there is going to be, this kind of an engagement that one's going to have over the square frame. Within that, there were a lot of conversations happening around also how, what does it mean to do theater? Does it mean theater or not? And then, as Suresh said, one ended up doing so much that one just felt burnt out by the end of it, of doing so much of Zoom, so much of all that. And so when things opened, one was relieved to go back, and then when again things closed, one had to fall back on it. I feel like it's been a year of learning, immense learning. I think it's also been a year of taking a lot of assumptions that we have about our practice sometimes, about what and where we stand in our practice. As Pallavi mentioned, like for example, a lot of freelancers, a lot of technicians lost work. So it in a space like theater, where it's a very collaborative form, where you need everyone to be together on a show day to make that happen. I think it was a huge challenge. So from my perspective, I would say, yeah, I think it pushed us in many ways. And I think there were phases. So I don't even think there is a homogeneous way to say what it did. If you ask me what it did in the first 3 months, I have a different answer. What it did in the last 3 months, I have a different answer. So I think that's what really it was. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. We have a question from Sunita Ramachandran. So, Sunita, would you like to ask question? Please unmute yourself and ask, please. Please address whom you are asking to.
Sunita, we can't hear you.
Hello.
Please be louder.
Oh.
I think she has dropped off.
No, she's here. I can see her. Isn't she here?
No, I think she.
Right at the moment, she
Lost
wanted
the
to ask.
connection.
I think she was not.
I can see her, but
I can also see her.
you have to unmute
Sunita,
yourself.
can you?
No,
No.
she has unmuted.
Yeah, Sunita, can you hear us? They say no, we all sound like we are doing planchette, right? You hear us? Are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see Sunita again. Sunita, unmute yourself.
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ?
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you now. Yeah.
ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ, ನನ್ನ ಹೆಸರು ಸುನೀತಾ ಅಂತ. ನನ್ನ ಕ್ವಶನ್ ಬಂದು ಸುರೇಶ್ ಜಯರಾಮ್ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ. ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ?
ಕೇಳಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಹೇಳಿ.
ನೀವು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಕೈ ತಗೊಂಡಾಗ ಸುಮಾರು ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಶನ್ಗಳನ್ನ ನೋಡ್ತೇನೆ. ಕೌದಿ ವರ್ಕ್ಶಾಪ್, ಲಾಲ್ಬಾಗ್ ಮ್ಯಾಪ್, ಫೋಟೋಗ್ರಫಿ ಡಿಸ್ಪ್ಲೇ ಪಬ್ಲಿಕ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು, ವರ್ಕ್ ಡಿಸ್ಪ್ಲೇ. ನಾನು ಈಗ ಒಂದು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ನಾನು ತಗೊಳ್ತೀನಿ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಈ ಹಲವಾರು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ಗಳನ್ನ ಸಬ್ಮಿಟ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೇಕಾ, ಅಥವಾ ಒಂದ್ರಲ್ಲೇನೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಒಂದು ಏನು ಪ್ರಾಜೆಕ್ಟ್ ಡಿಸ್ಪ್ಲೇ ಅಥವಾ ಪ್ರೆಸೆಂಟೇಶನ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸ್ ತರ ಅದನ್ನ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದಾ?
ನೀವು ಒಂದನ್ನೇ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು, ಅದರಲ್ಲಿ ಬೇರೆ ಬೇರೆ ಸೆಕ್ಷನ್ಸ್ ಇರ್ಬೋದು. ಸೊ ನೀವು ಒಂದನ್ನ ಮಾಡಿ IFA ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಮೀಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ಅವ್ರು ನಿಮಗೆ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಹೇಗೆ ಎಲಾಬ್ರೇಟ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ. ಅದರಿಂದ ನೀವು ಹೇಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ ಮುಂದೆ ತಗೊಂಡೋಗೋದು ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನೀವು ಆಮೇಲೆ ಯೋಚನೆ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು. ಫಸ್ಟ್ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಐಡಿಯಾ ಏನಿದೆ ಅದ್ರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನೀವೇನಾದರೂ ಕಾನ್ಸೆಪ್ಟ್ ನೋಟ್ ಬರೆದು IFA ಜಾನ್ ಅವ್ರನ್ನ ಹೋಗಿ ಮೀಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ಮತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಅವರು ಅದನ್ನ ಓದಿ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಏನಾದರೂ ಅಡ್ವೈಸ್ ಕೊಡ್ತಾರೆ.
ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ ಯು.
Thank you, Suresh, for that answer. And before I thank everyone, I'd like to make an announcement that the next IFA project showcase will be at the end of July. And please follow IFA on social media handles to get updated about the next IFA event. And first of all, let me thank all the audience members for listening to this enriching session, which I'm sure that would have given you ideas about pursuing your curatorial journey and asking questions about Bangalore and to apply. So please write to me on my email address, which is john@indiaifa.org, and I'll help you in developing your ideas as proposals that IFA can consider. And let me thank MD Pallavi for making such a lively session today, and enriching it in both languages. And I thank Suresh Jayaram and Chanakya Vyas for sharing your insights about your curatorial journey before applying, while doing the project, as well as your insights after having done that. So thank you all for joining us today evening. Have a
Thank you,
great night.
John. Thank you, Arundhati.
Thank you.
Arundhati
Thank
wants
you.
to say something.
Yeah. Just to say that this is a category that is open throughout the year. So while the call is going to, you would have received it, it's on our website, but John is available to you throughout the year to answer questions. And yeah, it's not a time bound open session. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, Pallavi, Chanakya.
Bye, Chanakya,
Bye.
Pallavi,
Bye,
John,
Suresh. Bye,
Arundhati.
Pallavi. Bye,
Thanks.
Arundhati. Bye, John.
Bye.